Picture a broken cowboy, living alone on his ranch for 2 years after losing his wife, with only his dog for company. That was me, Marcus Thompson, until one windy evening when I heard crying carried on the wind. Following that haunting sound, I discovered 3 young orphans huddled around my wife's grave, clinging to my dog for warmth and comfort. These children had been walking for days through the Texas wilderness, and somehow they'd found the one place on my property that represented love and protection. What happened next didn't just change their lives. It brought me back from the edge of despair and showed me that love can bloom again in the most unexpected ways. If you've ever felt like giving up on happiness, this story will show you that sometimes our greatest blessings come when we least expect them. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances. Subscribe for more heartwarming stories of hope and family. And ring the bell, because what these children called me next will touch your soul. The Texas wind had been howling all day, carrying dust and tumbleweeds across my small ranch, like ghosts from the past. I sat on my porch, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The wind always made me restless, especially when it blew from the south, carrying scents and sounds that reminded me of her dot. My name is Marcus Thompson, though most folks who knew me before just called me Mac. At 38, I'd been working this patch of land for 15 years, first with my wife Elena, and now for the past 2 years, alone. Elena died of fever in the summer of '83, and since then I'd become something of a hermit, venturing into town only when absolutely necessary for supplies. Only companion I had left was Ranger, a large brown and white cattle dog who'd been Elena's favorite. He had the same gentle spirit she'd possessed, and sometimes I caught him looking toward her grave with the same longing I felt every day. Speaking of which, Ranger wasn't on the porch with me as usual. I whistled for him, but got no response. That was odd. He rarely wandered far from the house, especially this close to evening. I was about to go looking for him when I heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold. It was crying, faint but unmistakable, carried on the wind. At first, I thought it might be coyotes, but there was something distinctly human about it, something that spoke of desperate sorrow. The sound seemed to be coming from the direction of the small hill behind my house, where Elena rested under the old oak tree. My stomach clenched. Nobody had any business being up there, especially not at this hour. I grabbed my rifle from inside the house and made my way up the familiar path. The crying grew louder as I climbed, and now I could distinguish different voices, more than one person, and they sounded young, very young. When I crested the hill, the sight that greeted me stopped me dead in my tracks. 3 children sat huddled around Elena's grave marker, their small arms wrapped around Ranger, who was lying perfectly still and letting them use him as a pillow. The children were dirty and thin, wearing clothes that had seen much better days. The oldest looked to be maybe 7, with dark hair and serious eyes. The middle child appeared to be about 5, and the youngest couldn't have been more than 3 years old. All 3 were crying, not the loud wailing of children throwing tantrums, but the quiet, exhausted sobbing of those who had reached the end of their strength. "Who's there?" I called out, raising my rifle slightly. The oldest child's head snapped up, eyes wide with fear. But instead of running, she wrapped her arms more protectively around the younger ones. "Please don't hurt us, mister," she whispered. "We're not stealing nothing. We just needed somewhere to rest." I lowered the rifle, taking in the scene more carefully. These children were clearly in trouble, lost, hungry, and frightened. But what struck me most was where they'd chosen to rest. Of all the places on my property, they'd somehow found their way to Elena's grave. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice softer now. "We've been walking for days," the girl said. Little Annie here can't walk much further, and when we saw this place ... She gestured to the grave marker with its simple wooden cross and Alana's name carved by my own hand. It felt safe, like somebody loved somebody here. The words hit me, harder than I expected. Elena would have loved this, children seeking comfort at her resting place. She'd always had a way with young ones, always said she could see straight into their hearts. "Where are your parents?" I asked. "Dead," the girl said simply. "Fever took them last month, back in San Antonio. The church folks said they'd find homes for us, but they wanted to split us up. Said it would be easier that way." Her voice grew fierce. "But we're family. We stay together, so they'd run." 3 children, the oldest barely 7, had somehow made it out of San Antonio and across the Texas wilderness to end up at my wife's grave. The middle child, a boy with sun-bleached hair, looked up at me with eyes that seemed too old for his face. "We're hungry, mister," he said quietly, "and Annie's been coughing real bad." I looked at the youngest child, the little girl called Annie. Even in the fading light, I could see the fever flush on her cheeks and hear the rattle in her breathing. She was sick, possibly seriously, so Doc Ranger lifted his head and looked at me with those knowing brown eyes. Elena used to say he could judge character better than most people. If he was comfortable enough to let these children use him as a pillow, it said something about them. "What are your names?" I asked, making a decision that surprised me. "I'm Mary," the oldest said. "This is James, and this is Annie. We're the Washingtons." "Well, Mary Washington," I said, shouldering my rifle, "it's getting dark, and that little one needs food and warmth. You can't stay out here all night." "We ain't looking for charity," Mary said quickly. "We can work for our keep." "I'm sure you can. But right now, let's get Annie inside before she catches her death." I bent down and carefully lifted the little girl, feeling how light she was, how fragile. She was burning with fever, and her breathing was shallow and labored. James walked beside me, staying close to his little sister, while Mary kept a protective eye on both of them. Ranger followed us down the hill, his tail wagging slightly, the first time I'd seen him show real happiness in months. Inside the house, I laid Annie on the sofa and built up the fire. The children looked around my small home with wide eyes, taking in the simple furniture, the few photographs on the mantel, the lived-in comfort of a place that had once housed love. "You live here all by yourself?" James asked. "Just me and Ranger," I replied, going to the kitchen to see what food I could find. "What about the lady on the grave?" Mary asked. "Was she your wife?" I paused in my search through the pantry. "Yes, her name was Elena. She must have been real nice," Mary said softly. "Annie stopped crying when we got to her place. Like she was watching over us or something." I found some bread and preserves, along with milk that was still fresh. It wasn't much, but it would have to do until I could cook something more substantial. "Here," I said, bringing the food to them. "Eat slowly. Don't want to make yourself sick." I watched as Mary carefully divided the food, making sure Annie and James got the larger portions. She was 7 years old and already acting like a mother. It reminded me of the stories Elena used to tell about taking care of her younger siblings after their parents died. "How long have you been walking?" I asked. "Near on a week," Mary said between careful bites. "We been sleeping rough, eating what we could find. Yesterday Annie got real sick, and I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought we weren't going to make it." Annie coughed again, a harsh sound that echoed through the quiet house. I could see the worry in Mary's eyes, the weight of responsibility that no child should have to carry. "She needs a doctor." I said. "We ain't got money for no doctor," Mary replied. "I do." The words came out before I'd really thought about them. But looking at this sick little girl, I knew I couldn't just turn them away. Elena wouldn't have, and neither could I. That night, I gave the children my bed while I slept on the floor beside the sofa where Annie lay. Several times during the night, I woke to check on her, finding Mary already awake, watching over her siblings with fierce dedication. "You should sleep," I told her during one of these midnight vigils. "Can't," she whispered back. "If something happens to them, it's my fault. I'm the one who decided we should run. You're not responsible for keeping them alive all by yourself," I said gently. "Sometimes it's okay to let other people help." "Why would you help us?" Mary asked. "You don't even know us." I looked at this brave little girl who'd somehow kept her family together through impossible circumstances. And I thought about Elena's grave, about how these children had been drawn to the one place on my property that represented love and protection. "Because," I said quietly, "I think my wife would have wanted me to. In the morning, I would ride to town for the doctor. I would figure out what to do with 3 orphan children who'd appeared at my wife's grave like a message from beyond. But for now, I sat in my darkened house, listening to the sound of children breathing, and felt something stir in my chest that I'd thought was dead and buried. Maybe Elena was still watching over me after all." Dawn came with Annie's coughing fits getting worse, and I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I saddled my horse Thunder and rode hard to town, leaving Ranger to watch over the children. Dr. Holbrook was just opening his office when I arrived, and the surprise on his face was evident. I hadn't been to town in over 6 months. "Mac Townsend," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "What brings you here so early?" "Got a sick child at my place. Little girl, maybe 3 years old. Fever and a bad cough." Dr. Holbrook raised an eyebrow. "Child? I wasn't aware you had any family visiting." "It's complicated. Can you come or not?" Within an hour, we were back at my ranch. The doctor's expression grew increasingly puzzled as I explained about finding the children at Elena's grave, but his professional instincts took over when he examined Annie. "Pneumonia," he diagnosed after a thorough examination, "but caught early enough. With proper care, medicine, and rest, she should recover fully." He left medication and detailed instructions, refusing my offer of payment. "Consider it a contribution to whatever good work Elena would have wanted you doing," he said with a knowing smile. After he left, I found myself truly looking at these children for the first time in daylight. Mary was definitely the leader, her small face serious beyond her years as she carefully measured out Annie's medicine. James was quiet but observant, helping without being asked. And Annie, despite her illness, had the sweetest smile I'd ever seen. "Mr. Mack," James said that afternoon as we sat on the porch while Annie napped inside, "can I ask you something?" "Sure, son. What was your wife like?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't talked about Elena to anyone since she died, had barely been able to think about her without the grief overwhelming me. "She was." I paused, searching for words. "She was kind. The kindest person I ever knew. She could see good in everyone, even when they couldn't see it in themselves." "Is that why you're helping us?" Mary asked. "Because she was kind? Partly, but also because," I struggled to explain, "because I think she sent you to me." "Sent us?" James looked confused. "Call it what you want. Fate, providence, coincidence. But 3 lost children finding their way to my wife's grave on the exact day I was." I stopped myself. "You was what?" Mary pressed. I hadn't planned to tell them, but something in their earnest faces made me continue. "I was thinking about giving up. On the ranch, on everything. I'd been sitting on that porch for hours, wondering what the point was of keeping going. And then you found us," Mary said softly. "And then I found you." Over the next few days, as Annie slowly recovered, the children began to settle into a routine at the ranch. Mary appointed herself my kitchen helper, though she was barely tall enough to reach the stove. James took to following me around during chores, asking endless questions about the cattle, the horses, the land itself. "Why do you only have 12 cows?" he asked one morning as we checked on the small herd. "Used to have more," I said, "but after Elena died, I just stopped caring about expanding the operation." "Maybe you could care again," James said with the innocent wisdom only children possess, "now that you got us to help." The boy had a point. For the first time in 2 years, I found myself thinking about the future instead of just surviving each day. Annie's recovery was remarkable. Within a week, she was up and about, chattering constantly in the way 3-year-olds do. She'd taken a particular liking to Ranger, and the dog seemed to understand that his job was to watch over her with special care. But it was Mary who continued to puzzle me. Despite being only 7, she carried herself with a maturity that spoke of too much responsibility too young. One evening, as we sat by the fire after Annie and James had gone to bed, I decided to ask her about it. "Mary, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded, looking up from the sewing she was doing, mending a tear in James's shirt with stitches that would have made Elena proud. "How long have you been taking care of your brother and sister?" "Since Mama got sick," she said quietly. "That was about 6 months before she died. Papa was working all the time, trying to pay for medicine, so it was mostly me looking after them. That's a lot of responsibility for someone your age. Wasn't so bad. I like taking care of people." She paused in her sewing. "Mr. Mack, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you going to keep us?" The question hung in the air between us. It was one I'd been avoiding thinking about, even though I knew it was coming. "What do you want?" I asked instead of answering. "I want us to stay together," she said firmly. "I don't care where, as long as we ain't split up." "And what about staying here?" "Would you want that?" Mary looked around the small house, her eyes taking in the warm glow of the fire, the photographs of Elena on the mantel, the sense of home that even I'd forgotten existed. "This is the first place that's felt safe since Mama and Papa died," she said quietly. "And you're the first grown-up who's looked at us like we was people instead of problems." That night, after the children were asleep, I found myself standing at Elena's grave again. The wind was calmer now, carrying the scent of wildflowers instead of dust. "I know you can't answer me," I said to the wooden cross, "but I could use some guidance here. These children need a home, and I need them more than I want to admit. But I don't know if I'm the right person to raise them. I don't know anything about being a father." As if in response, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the oak tree, and I could swear I heard Elena's voice on the wind. "Love them, Marcus. Just love them. That's all any child really needs." When I got back to the house, I found Mary sitting by the dying fire, still awake. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. "Just thinking," she said. "Mr. Mack, if we stayed here, we'd work real hard. We wouldn't be no burden." I sat down beside her, seeing in her young face the same fierce protectiveness Elena had always shown for those she loved. "Mary," I said gently, "families aren't about work or burden. They're about love and belonging. And if you stayed here, it wouldn't be as my hired hands. It would be as my children." The smile that spread across her face was brighter than the fire. "Really? You'd want to be our pa?" "If you'd want me to be." "More than anything," she whispered, and threw her arms around my neck in a hug that nearly broke my heart with its fierce sweetness. The next morning, I woke to the sound of laughter, something that hadn't echoed through these walls in 2 years. Annie was giggling as James played peekaboo with her, while Mary hummed as she prepared breakfast. Ranger lay contentedly by the fire, his tail thumping against the floor. For the first time since Elena's death, my house felt like a home again. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but over the following weeks, I watched as 3 frightened orphans became confident children with a place they belonged. Annie's health returned completely, and with it came an irrepressible spirit that filled every corner of the house with joy. James proved to have a natural gift with animals, helping me with the cattle and horses in ways that genuinely made the work easier. And Mary bloomed like a flower that had finally found the right soil. Pamak, Annie called one morning, the new name she'd started using rolling off her tongue as naturally as breathing. Look what Ranger taught me. She demonstrated how Ranger had learned to lie down and let her climb on his back for rides around the yard. The patient dog's tail wagged constantly now, as if he too had rediscovered his purpose. That's mighty impressive, sweetheart, I said, lifting her down and receiving a gap-toothed grin in return. The word pa had started with Annie, but soon all 3 children were using it. Each time I heard it, something warm unfurled in my chest, a feeling I'd thought was gone forever. One afternoon, about a month after they'd arrived, Sheriff Davies rode up to the house. The children immediately grew tense, memories of running from authorities still fresh in their minds. It's all right, I told them quietly. He's a friend. Sheriff Davies dismounted and tipped his hat. Mac, been hearing interesting stories about you in town. What kind of stories? The kind that say you've got yourself some children now. Folks are curious. I glanced at Mary, who was holding Annie protectively while James stepped closer to my side. They're my children, I said simply. Is that a problem? Depends. Are they here legally? A question I'd been dreading. I explained about finding them at Alana's grave, about their parents' death, about their escape from San Antonio. Sheriff Davies listened thoughtfully, occasionally glancing at the children who watched him with wary eyes. Well, he said finally, seems to me like 3 orphan children finding a good home is exactly what's supposed to happen. Don't see any reason for the law to get involved, as long as everyone's happy with the arrangement. The relief on the children's faces was immediate and profound. Thank you, Sheriff, Mary said with the formal politeness she used with strangers. You're welcome, little miss. Mac's a good man. You're lucky to have found each other. That evening, James approached me with a question that had clearly been weighing on his mind. Pamak, are we really going to stay forever? Like really, truly forever? If that's what you want, son. But what if we're too much trouble? What if we mess up or break something important? I knelt down so I was at his eye level. James, do you know what the most important thing in this house is? He looked around, considering. Your pictures of Miss Elena? Those are precious to me, yes. But the most important things in this house are you, Mary, and Annie. Nothing you could break would be more important than you are. What about if we get sick again? Or if we eat too much food? And I'll take care of you and buy more food. What about if we grow up and don't need you anymore? That question hit deeper than I expected. Then I'll be proud that I helped raise such independent, capable people. But James, families don't stop being families just because children grow up. I'll always be your pa, and you'll always be my son. The boy thought about this seriously. Good, he said finally, because I always wanted a pa like you. Fall brought new challenges and new joys. Mary started helping me with the bookkeeping. For the ranch, her quick mind grasping numbers and planning in ways that impressed me. James had become indispensable with the animals, and even Annie had her jobs, collecting eggs from the chickens and helping. Mary with simple cooking tasks, but it was the evening rituals that meant the most to me. After supper, we'd sit by the fire while I read to them from the few books I had. Elena had loved to read, and I found myself wishing I had more books to share with my new family. Pamak, Mary said one such evening, could you tell us about Miss Elena? I mean, if it don't make you too sad. I looked at her serious face, at James and Annie, curled up on either side of me, and realized that talking about Elena didn't hurt the way it used to. The children's presence hadn't erased my love for my wife, but it had given it a place to live, alongside new love. She would have loved you all so much, I began. Elena always said she could tell what kind of heart a person had just by looking in their eyes. And she had the biggest heart of anyone I ever knew. Did she want children? Annie asked. More than anything. We tried for a long time to have a family. It just never happened for us. Maybe that's why she sent us to you, James said thoughtfully. Maybe she knew you needed us as much as we needed you. Maybe she did, son. Maybe she did. Winter arrived early that year, but instead of dreading the cold and isolation as I had for the past 2 years, I found myself looking forward to cozy evenings with my family. The children had never experienced a Christmas with presents and a real celebration, so I began secretly preparing for what I hoped would be a magical holiday. One snowy December evening, as we sat around the fire, Annie climbed into my lap with the easy affection that had become natural between us. "Pamak," she said, "are you happy we found you?" I looked around at my transformed home, at Mary teaching James to play checkers, at Ranger contentedly chewing a bone by the fire, at the stockings Mary had sewn hanging by the mantel in preparation for Christmas. "Sweetheart," I said, finding you three was the best thing that ever happened to me. "Even better than finding Miss Elena?" she asked with the innocent directness of childhood. I considered the question carefully. "Different kind of good," I said finally. "Miss Elena taught me how to love. You three taught me how to heal." "What's heal mean?" "It means fixing something that was broken. My heart was broken when Miss Elena died, but you children helped put it back together." Annie nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to her. "I'm glad we helped fix you, Pamak, because you fixed us too." That night, after tucking all 3 children into their beds, a routine that had become sacred to me, I stepped outside to check on the livestock one final time. The snow was falling gently, muffling all sound except for the soft lowing of cattle and the distant call of an owl. I found myself walking up the hill to Elena's grave, something I hadn't done since the night I'd found the children there. The wooden cross stood peaceful in the moonlight, surrounded by the blanket of fresh snow. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I don't know if you sent them to me or if it was just luck, but thank you. For the first time since you died, I feel like I'm really living again." The wind stirred gently through the oak tree, and I could swear I felt Elena's presence, warm and approving, surrounding me like an embrace. When I returned to the house, I found a light still on in Mary's room. I knocked softly and found her, sitting by the window, looking out at the falling snow. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" "Just thinking," she said. "Pa Mac, do you think our Mama and Papa would be happy about us being here?" "I think they'd be grateful that you found someone who loves you and wants to take care of you." "Good," she said with satisfaction, "because I don't ever want to leave." "You don't have to," I assured her. "This is your home now, forever." As I finally headed to my own bed, I marveled at how completely my life had changed. 6 months ago, I'd been a bitter, broken man with no hope for the future. Now I was the father of 3 remarkable children, with a house full of love and laughter, and a heart that was learning to trust in happiness again. The children might have been the ones who were lost when they found me at Elena's grave, but I was beginning to understand that I'd been just as lost as they were. We'd saved each other, and in doing so, we'd created something beautiful. A family born not of blood, but of choice, love, and the healing power of belonging. Christmas morning brought squeals of delight that echoed through the house as the children discovered the gifts I'd secretly purchased during trips to town. James's eyes lit up when he unwrapped a set of real cowboy spurs, while Mary clutched the new dress I'd bought her, the first one that was truly hers, and not a hand-me-down. Annie's laughter filled the room as she hugged the beautiful porcelain doll I'd found, immediately naming her Elena in honor of the woman she'd never met but already loved. "Pa Mac, this is the best Christmas ever," Annie declared, dancing around the room with her new doll. "Best Christmas I ever had too, sweetheart," I replied, and meant it completely. But the real gift came that evening. After we'd eaten our Christmas feast and were sitting contentedly by the fire, Mary approached me with something hidden behind her back, her face serious but excited. "Pa Mac, we got something for you too," she said. "You didn't need to get me anything." "We made it," James added, bouncing with excitement. Mary pulled out a small wooden frame, clearly handcrafted, containing a piece of paper with carefully written words. My breath caught as I read what they'd created. "Our family, Pa Mac Thompson, Mary Washington Thompson, James Washington Thompson, Annie Washington Thompson, Miss Elena. Watching over us, Ranger Thompson forever and always." James carved the frame with his new knife, Mary explained. "And I wrote the words. And Annie drew the flowers around the edges, see?" I looked at the simple, heartfelt gift and felt tears prick my eyes. They'd given themselves my last name, officially making us a family in their minds, if not yet in law. "This is perfect," I managed to say. "Absolutely perfect." "Do you really think of us as Thompsons?" James asked hopefully. "I think of you as my children," I said. "And if you want to be Thompsons, then that's what will make it legal." The joy on their faces was worth everything. Spring brought new challenges and new growth. I'd been thinking about expanding the ranch operation, and with James's natural skill with animals and Mary's head for numbers, it seemed possible again. We added more cattle and started planning improvements to the property. But the most important growth was in the children themselves. Mary had started teaching Annie and James their letters using the few books we had and materials I brought from town. James was reading simple sentences and had shown a remarkable aptitude for working with his hands. Annie had grown taller and stronger, her early frailness completely overcome. One afternoon in late April, as I watched James help repair a fence, while Mary supervised Annie's letter practice nearby, I realized that this wasn't just about me taking care of 3 orphan children anymore. We'd become a real family, with all the complexity and beauty that entailed. That evening brought unexpected visitors. A well-dressed couple in a fancy buggy drove up to the house, and I immediately sensed trouble. The children, playing in the yard, grew quiet and moved closer to me. "Mr. Thompson," the man said as he climbed down from the buggy, "I'm Harrison Blake, and this is my wife, Constance. We're from the San Antonio Children's Aid Society." My blood ran cold. "What can I do for you?" "We're here about the Washington children. We've received reports that they're living here without proper legal arrangements." Mary stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "We don't want to go with you. This is our home." "Children don't always know what's best for them," Mrs. Blake said dismissively. "Mr. Thompson, while we appreciate your charitable impulses, these children need proper placement with approved families." "They have a proper family," I said firmly. "Me." "You're an unmarried man with no experience raising children," Mr. Blake replied. "The society has identified suitable families in San Antonio who are eager to provide homes for these children." "Separate families?" Mary asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Well, yes. It's quite difficult to place 3 children together, but individually they'll have wonderful opportunities. No," Annie cried, running to hide behind me. "We stay together." I placed a protective hand on each child, while Mary stood defiantly beside us. "Mr. Blake, these children are happy and healthy here. They're receiving education, proper care, and most importantly, they're together. What exactly is the problem?" "The problem is that this arrangement lacks official oversight. These children could be better served. Could they? I interrupted. Mary, tell these folks about your life here. Mary straightened her shoulders. I can read and write and do sums. James can work with animals and is learning carpentry. Annie knows her letters and helps with cooking. We got our own beds and plenty to eat and a pa who loves us. And we love him too, James added fiercely. He's our real pa now. Mrs. Blake looked unmoved. Emotional attachments can be reformed. What matters is proper placement according to regulations. The only regulation that matters to me, I said, my voice deadly calm, is that these children are happy and safe. And they are. Mr. Thompson, if you don't cooperate, we have the authority to involve the local sheriff, ... No need for that, came a familiar voice. Sheriff Davies rode up, dismounting with the easy grace of a man comfortable with his authority. Heard there might be some trouble out here. Sheriff, Mr. Blake said, clearly relieved. We're here on official business from the Children's Aid Society. These children need to be properly placed. Sheriff Davies looked at the children clustered around me, and at the well-dressed strangers. Seems to me they're already properly placed. Mac Thompson's a good man, and these children are clearly thriving. But the legal requirements, ... Mrs. Blake began. Have been met, Sheriff Davies said firmly. Mr. Thompson filed all the necessary guardianship papers 3 months ago. Judge Harrison approved them. These children are legally his wards. I felt a surge of gratitude toward the sheriff, who'd apparently taken care of paperwork I hadn't even known I needed. That ... that can't be right, Mr. Blake stammered. It's right, Sheriff Davies confirmed. Now, unless you have some evidence of mistreatment or neglect, I suggest you folks head back to San Antonio. After the couple left, muttering about irregular procedures, Sheriff Davies accepted my invitation to stay for supper. As we sat around the table, he explained what he'd done. Filed the papers myself when I saw how well you were all doing together, he said. Judge Harrison was happy to approve them. Said it was about time Mac Thompson found some happiness again. Thank you, I said simply. I can't tell you what this means. Means you're a family now, official and legal, he replied. Just like you've been in your hearts all along. That night, after the children were asleep, I found myself once again walking up to Elena's grave. The spring evening was warm and peaceful, with the sound of cattle lowing softly in the distance and the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Well, Elena, I said to the wooden cross, it's official now. I'm a father to 3 amazing children. I think you'd love them as much as I do. I sat down beside the grave, something I hadn't done since that first night when I'd found the children here. I used to think you were gone forever, that death had taken everything we had together. But I understand now that love doesn't die with the body. You're still here, in the way I care for these children, in the lessons about kindness and compassion that you taught me. A gentle breeze stirred the oak leaves above me, and I felt that familiar sense of Elena's presence, warm and approving. They call themselves Thompsons now, I continued. Mary Thompson, James Thompson, Annie Thompson. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? I stood up, brushing dirt from my pants, and took one last look at the simple grave marker. Thank you, Elena, for everything, for teaching me how to love, and for somehow bringing these children to me when I needed them most. As I walked back down the hill toward my house, our house, I could see warm light glowing in the windows and hear the faint sound of laughter from inside. Ranger met me at the door, his tail wagging, and I could hear the children's voices as Mary read a bedtime story to James and Annie. I paused on the threshold, taking in the scene. 2 years ago, this house had been a tomb, filled with nothing but memories and grief. Now it was alive with love, laughter, and the beautiful chaos of family life. Pa Mac, Annie called when she saw me. Mary's reading the story about the princess. Save. My place, I called back. I'll be right there. As I hung up my hat and prepared to join my children for their bedtime story, I marveled at the journey that had brought us all together. 3 orphan children crying in the wind had found their way to my wife's grave, and in doing so, they'd found their way home. But more than that, they'd given me back my life, my purpose, and my ability to love without fear. We were the Thompson family now, Mac, Mary, James, Annie, and in our hearts, Elena too. We were proof that families aren't just created by birth, but by choice, by love, and by the mysterious ways that broken hearts can heal each other. When they're brave enough to try, the wind might have carried their cries to me that first night. But what it had really brought was hope, love, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as unexpected responsibilities. We were home, all of us forever.